wanted to tell you about when I was a little girl. I used to go help my grandmother clean her house every Saturday. I helped her clean all 4 floors of her big house. And for helping her out, she paid me $10. I thought I was rich. And I was. I was rich because I got to work with my beloved grandmother. But I wouldn't want to be either one of the little girls in this story, because these girls had to help clean house for old Gollymander. She was stingy. She didn't share anything. And she was mean, nasty, nasty mean, and lazy. She didn't like to help do anything, let alone her own housework in her house. So she hired little girls to come help her clean her house. Well, they all would come and could not stand working for old Gollymander, so they never stayed very long. But one day, she hired a little girl who was just as nasty mean as she was, and just as lazy. So the fact was, they got along pretty well together. But one day, old Gollymander had had this little girl working for her long enough, and she thought she could trust the little girl, could go out visiting and leave the little girl all alone in her house. What old Gollymander meant by visiting was going and stealing money from other people to keep for herself. But before she left to go visiting, she said to the little girl, "Now listen here, you can scrub a dub and you can rub a rub, but don't peek up my chimney." "Oh, mercy," said the little girl. "I wouldn't do that. I would never even think of doing that. Not me. Bye-bye now." Well, the little girl was left all alone as Gollymander headed out the door. And you know the first thing she did. She got a broom, but she wasn't going to sweep with it. She turned it the other way up, and she took that broom handle, and she poked up in that chimney, and drop, plop, down came a long leather purse. And she picked it up and opened it, and it was filled with gold and silver coins. "Woo-hoo!" said the little girl. "Mine, all mine!" And she ran out of the house. She was headed down the road, going to go to the ocean, get on a boat, and sail around the world with all that money. And as she was running toward the ocean shore, along her way, there was a cow on the other side of a fence. And it called out to her. It said, "Oh, little girl, don't be a hag. Stop here a minute and help milk my old milking bag." That girl said, "I don't have time for you, honey. I got to travel the world, spend all this money." And off she went without helping that cow. She ran and ran as fast as her feet could carry her. And pretty soon, on the other side of the road, there was an old horse. It was an old workhorse. Its back was bent from years of hauling here and there. And it called out to her, "Oh, little girl, don't run no more. Stop a minute and rub my back. It's awful sore." She said, "I don't have time for you, honey. I got to travel the world, spend all this money." And off she went down the road, leaving that poor horse alone. She was almost to the ocean shore when there by the side of the road was a peach tree. It was so full of ripe, juicy peaches that its branches and limbs were hanging low and miserable. And it called out to the little girl, "Oh, little girl, before you go, won't you pick my peaches? My limbs hurt me so." But the little girl said, I don't have time for you, honey. I got to travel the world spending all this money." And off she went. Meanwhile, back at the house, old Gollymander had gotten home. Took her one look to see that the little girl was gone. She saw the soot down by the chimney, and she saw that her purse was gone. And she cried out in horror, "Oh, Gollymander, Gollymander, what could be worse? That little girl's run away with my long leather purse." And out the door she went, after the little girl, going to get her good. Well, she ran and she ran, but she didn't quite know which way to go. So when she saw that cow, she said, "Oh, cow, have you seen a gal go by? She stole my money, and that's no lie." And the cow said, "Yep." She went that away and pointed in the direction the girl went with one of its long horns. That is how Gollymander knew which way to go. And she went quicker and quicker until she lost her way and asked a horse, "Oh, horse, have you seen a gal go by? She stole my money, and that's no lie." Well, the horse was happy to say, "Yep, she went that-a-way," and pointed with its long, swishy tail. Gollymander was making good time. When she got to that peach tree, she was confused, didn't know which way to go, so she asked the peach tree, "Peach tree, have you seen a gal go by? She stole my money, and that's no lie." And the peach tree took one of its limbs at the top that wasn't with a peach and pointed and said, "She went that way." And so with their help, the old woman was able to catch up with the little girl. She was standing on the ocean shore waiting for a boat. Old Gollymander grabbed her and took her purse and threw that girl, pew, into the salty sea, where she had to swim for safety. But old Gollymander, she had her money back, which wasn't really hers. And she made her way back to her house, and she stuffed it back up into the chimney. And what a mess! All that soot on the floor. She needed to hire another little girl for her work. This time she hired a little girl who was just the opposite of the last. This little girl was good and kind-hearted and a hard worker. And when she was hired by old Gollymander, she did not like that old woman at all. She could tell how nasty mean she was, but she'd been hired to do a job, and she was going to stick it through. So it was very soon when old Gollymander saw that she could trust this little girl, and she told her that she was going to go visiting. You and I know what that means, don't we? She was going to go visiting and going to leave that girl alone. But before she left that house, she said to the little girl, she said, "Now you can scrub-a-dub and you can rub-a-rub, but don't peek up my chimney." And the little girl said, "I would never think of doing anything like that." And she meant it too. And she wouldn't have peeked up the chimney. She did not peek up the chimney. After old Gollymander left, she cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and began to wonder when old Gollymander didn't return. Began to think something had happened. So she cleaned in areas she'd never cleaned before. In fact, she took that broom and she started sweeping out the chimney soot, cleaning it out. And plop, drop, down came a long leather purse. She picked it up and she saw it was filled with money. "That must be it," she said. "That old Gollymander is out there in the world and she doesn't have her bag of money. I need to return it to her and then she'll be able to come home." And so the little girl lit out of the house, running to find old Gollymander, gonna give her back her money. Well, on her way, what did she see but a cow by the side of the road? It looked miserable. She knew just what to do. She stopped, found a bucket nearby, sat down and milked that cow till it was dry and comfy. She patted the cow on the head and made her way, looking for old Gollymander, looking this way and that, when what did she see? A horse, bent in the back, sore and old. She could tell that horse needed some loving care. So she stopped and she combed out the briars and she brushed its back and she rubbed it and loved on it. And when it was comfortable again, she headed out down the road. She headed out, was almost to the shore when there was a peach tree. Its branches so heavy with peaches that it looked like it would break. So she got some bushel baskets and she started picking all those peaches off the tree until the tree was light and happy again. And she continued on her way to the ocean. But meanwhile, back at the house, old Gollymander had come home. Took her 1 second to look around and see, that girl, she stole from me. Oh, Gollymander, Gollymander, what could be worse? That little girl's run away with my long leather purse. And she headed out down the road after the little girl. She didn't know which way to go. So when she saw a